Okay. All right, well, let's get going. Well, good afternoon, everyone. By now, you've all heard the good news of the tentative agreement that was reached last night between Kaleida Health and CWA 1168 and 1199 for our master bargaining agreement, covering almost 6,300 members of the Kaleida Health family. I'd like to start with some opening remarks, and then we can open it up to questions. So I want to start by thanking both the bargaining committees of the union and the management teams. Their incredible dedication and relentlessness over the last 6 months to find that positive, productive path forward, resulting in the tentative agreement, has really just been awesome to see. I think we all owe them, the bargaining committees of labor and management, a tremendous debt of gratitude for finding that productive path and reaching a tentative agreement. Now, as you've heard, it's a 3-year agreement covering almost 6,300 employees of the Kaleida Health family. I want to talk a little bit about, the contract and the design behind the contract and mutual goals that we and labor shared throughout this process. The contract is designed to reward our current employees, increase wages, improve staffing, attract new staff, and retain new staff to Kaleida Health, all while putting Kaleida Health in a stronger position going forward. As you've heard me say many times over the past few weeks, this master bargaining agreement is incredibly complex and complicated. It comes at a very challenging time for the healthcare industry overall across the country and for Kaleida Health. So it was critical that we took the time and that we got it right working together. You've also heard me say that our number one priority is our workforce. Maintaining and enhancing our workforce is vital to the sustainability of Kaleida Health and for us to be able to continue to provide the highest quality care to Western New York. Now, it's also no secret that healthcare organizations like Kaleida Health across Western New York, the state, and the country have been battered by the impacts of COVID-19. Now, this new agreement will give us some financial certainty, at least from an expense perspective, as we rebuild and reimagine Kaleida Health. Now, that process of rebuilding and reimagining Kaleida is not going to be easy. Despite what many have said about the pandemic being over, that it's behind us for healthcare, that couldn't be further from the truth. 2022, by far, is the most challenging year for healthcare organizations since the start of the pandemic. And I believe that 2023 and 2024 could be even more challenging because the headwinds that we face in terms of financial and operational challenges, historic volume losses, revenue losses, rising inflation, skyrocketing expenses, those trends, we don't see them changing in the near future. So therefore, we need to change. We need to change quickly, we need to be nimble, and we need to act. Now, having said all of that, I am confident that by working together as a team, by focusing on our patients, that we can get there. And I'll repeat something that I said when I became CEO in the middle of July. Our workforce is our number one asset. And the commitment, the dedication, and the talent, and the resiliency of that team is unlike anything that I have ever seen before. And when I look at what we've accomplished over the last 2.5 years during COVID, and during the entire time that I've been at Kaleida Health, it's unparalleled. And so I think there's some keys to our success that I've seen over that time. And I want to talk a little bit about them with you. So one of them is that when we're clear about where we're going, when we know what our goal is, when we truly value one another as individuals, we really care about one another, and when we work as a team, there's nothing that we can't do. But the focus today is on our bargaining agreement, and so let's celebrate that because it's really the win-win-win. A win for our employees, a win for Kaleida Health, and most importantly, a win for our community. Now, despite how challenging the bargaining process was and the time that it took, it was important to take the time to do it right. And we believe that achieving a fair contract for our staff and for our workforce puts us in a stronger position going forward. I am very proud that we fulfilled the 3 stated objectives that we had at the beginning of bargaining. Number 1, no concessionary bargaining. The second was addressing staffing needs across the entire system of Kaleida Health, and then investing in our workforce with wage increases and more. It's also no surprise that our workforce has been stretched to the max the last 2.5 years, and they continue to step up to help address the challenges that we face. So it's vitally important, and the contract does this, it's vitally important that we continue to invest in them and their future and our future. They are very, very deserving. Now, as you've heard, because the agreement was just tentatively agreed to 12 hours ago, there is a process whereby it will be ratified by the union membership in the coming weeks. So we're not able to get into specifics about the contract now. To be fair, we need to educate our staff and the union's membership about the agreement. That ratification vote will come in the days ahead. I do want to end, though, with a special note of thanks. There are many, many friends of Kaleida Health, many people who were keenly interested in our outcome, and who we leaned on for their understanding, their counsel, and their support the past 6 months. Obviously, the board of directors of Kaleida Health, but also the elected officials, specifically wanting to, in particular, Governor Hochul and her team, the Western New York State Legislative Delegation, Congressman Higgins, County Executive Poloncarz, and Mayor Brown, all of whom worked collaboratively with Kaleida Health management and leadership and labor leadership to help us ensure a successful outcome for our community. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
You mentioned lawmakers at the end there. How much did that $25 million grant that was announced last week help the negotiations, if in any way?
So I think we've talked about in the past that we have over $160 million worth of grant applications that we've applied for across all of the entities of Kaleida Health, including long-term care, Children's Hospital, which is the award that we received, and then our adult hospitals, as well as distressed hospital funding for Olean General Hospital. So having the impact of that award gives us some greater understanding, but it wasn't what was used to settle the agreement.
One of the union members at the press conference earlier today mentioned that, at Kaleida Health, it's always said, we're a family, and sometimes it seemed like maybe people weren't listening to us, and now it seems like maybe you bridge some sort of gap. How do you think that's going to help with staff retention and staff recruitment in the years to come?
So when we kicked off bargaining, we had 3 overall objectives that we talked about at the kickoff. Number 1, we said we wanted to listen, right? Actively engage in understanding what the problem is. With that, we wanted to then collaboratively problem solve, and then through that process, we wanted to build trust. And I think when you look at the process that we went through with bargaining, even though it did take an extended period of time, we accomplished all 3 of those objectives, and I think the contract reflects that. And it gives us a springboard to continue that going forward in the organization as we work together with labor.
Sometimes there's some hard feelings that carry over when there's a labor dispute. Are you confident that those who aren't going to be around?
I am confident for exactly the reasons that we just talked about, right? We listened, we collaboratively problem solved, we focused on the relationship. Didn't mean that we always agreed, but at the end, by listening to one another, we were able to come to an agreement that we believe is fair for everybody.
Staffing was the big issue that came up over and over again. How is this going to help improve staffing?
Sure. So the contract, a goal that we had all along was to be the market leader from a salary perspective. So we believe that by being the market leader, that's going to allow us to not only retain our current staff, but to recruit additional staff to Kaleida Health. And then our commitment to investing in more staffing, providing more staff at the bedside, will also improve retention of our existing staff.
Are there any plans for any sort of collaborations for getting people who might be interested in a healthcare career to go down that path, since it seems like maybe some of them are going, maybe it's not so much for me?
Absolutely. One of the things that's vital going forward is to be able to work further upstream in interesting people in the healthcare profession, whether that's in high schools or in trade schools or in college. So really working collaboratively with the schools. We have a very robust workforce development plan, partnering with all of the local schools to do exactly that.
Do you think that people who left during the pandemic might come back with this new contract?
That was one of the goals that we talked about actively throughout the bargaining process, was could we for individuals that had left the workforce, could we, through our collective bargaining agreement, interest people in coming back to the workforce? And we introduced articles and language through that process with labor around back to common problem solving to identify opportunities to do that. Things like weekend-only positions, where an individual could be a full-time employee working at Kaleida Health and have full-time benefits, but only work on the weekend to address maybe elder care issues or child care issues that they might have.
Negotiations by their very nature involve give and take.
Mm-hmm.
And both sides are saying there are no concessions.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you come to the table?
Sure.
If both sides are saying, we made no concessions, we made no concessions, there are sticking points that always have to be worked out. One side always has to give a little bit to come to an agreement.
Yep. So the point about no concessions was for benefits that our staff already have or enjoy, we were not going to try to take or seek taking anything away from them. An example of that is health insurance and the contributions that employees make to health insurance. So that's an example of no concessions. But the process of bargaining is, as I said, is really sitting down at the table and understanding what is the common problem that we're trying to solve. Understanding each other's perspectives, and then trying through that process to find a solution that we both believe is a fair compromise. Doesn't mean that each of us gets what we necessarily want, but in the end, we have a better solution to the problem than before we started the conversation.
The strike authorization vote that happened, it seems that after that, the ball really got rolling and there was a lot of progress made over that time. How much of a motivator was that to get a deal done once you knew that was on the table?
We were motivated to get a deal done from the first day of bargaining in the middle of March. So the strike authorization was part of the process that labor goes through to understand the will of the membership, but the motivation by everybody, labor and management, existed from day one to get an agreement in place.
These things can carry on for a long time. I'm just glad that didn't happen. In a nutshell, why did it happen? Why did it come to a head so fast?
Why did the agreement come to a resolution?
So fast.
So I think it's the power of us working together as a team and understanding that it's in the best interest of everybody to get an agreement, and an agreement that's fair.
Is it a big kind of sigh of relief, not just from a healthcare perspective, from a patient care perspective, that we're not seeing an echoing of what happened last October with the Catholic Health?
Absolutely. A strike in this community, in particular because of the way Kaleida is organized and constructed, a strike could have taken place across all of our facilities. So a strike would have been devastating. It would have been it would have been catastrophic. And I don't know that it's something that our community would have ever recovered from. So that's why I'm so grateful to the bargaining committee for finding a productive path forward that ensures that that didn't happen in this community. We all owe them a debt of gratitude.
Is there a shift that you think we're going to see coming from out of this pandemic, that people want to make sure that the resources that they're given to do their job and to help these patients are accurate? I mean, with people, 96% voted to
Sure.
potentially strike, right? It seems like the pandemic kind of lit a fire under these providers.
So the last 2.5 years has been stretched our staff to the max. There's no doubt about it. The things that they've had to respond to every day on behalf of our community, as I said, they're incredibly deserving. But at the same time, our job, my job, our team's job is to ensure that they have what they need to provide the highest quality care to their patients. And this agreement ensures that that'll happen.
Just some details that at least the union touched on. This is retroactive back to May 31st.
That's correct.
Three-year deal?
That's correct. It's May 31st, 3-year deal.
Okay. So through 2025 then, are you confident that Kaleida will have the funds in that case? Because I know you guys are struggling, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a plan going forward to make sure that these promises can be fulfilled, say, in 2024, 2025?
Sure. Yes, there is a plan going forward. I mentioned already the state funding through the grant process that we're working not only in this state fiscal year, but in future state fiscal years. When you look at the governor's budget this year, excuse me, and some of what we're hearing about what could be in future years, she's certainly making a commitment and understands the needs of healthcare organizations across the state. Of course, we're in our annual planning process for our operating budget, and part of our process is always responding to the challenges that we face. But I do want to underscore what I said. The change that we need to implement in healthcare is here. And we have to move quickly and nimbly because all of the trends that we're seeing are suggesting that next year and the year after is going to continue.
Is it abnormal to be so reliant upon the grants or other funding, as you're mentioning, if you are that reliant in a union negotiation like this?
Well, we weren't reliant on it in the union negotiation. We're reliant on it as we try to work to transform the organization. The timing of our labor agreement just happened to coincide with the timing of that process.
I know some of the union workers were saying that they negotiated 500 new positions.
Mhm.
Are you confident that you are going to be able to fill that? Do you think the contract that you guys negotiated is attractive enough for those potentially 500 positions that you have to fill?
We do think, we, together, labor and management, think that the contract is attractive enough to do that. It is going to take time, though, to recruit those positions, and I think that's something that we also know and agree on.
Just one thing, just going off of that, I know that the unions also mentioned that there is kind of sort of a give and take with the hospitals here because you have one place that has better contract, if you will, and then you're stealing another thing from like another different healthcare. How big of an issue is that? Because, I'm sure you guys want to have enough people here, but for
Sure.
the community, I mean.
So obviously you negotiate an agreement in a context, right? And so we're negotiating at the same time that others are negotiating and others will negotiate after us. So that's part of that ongoing process that happens. I do think one of the things that we as a community are going to need to do is come together and understand just exactly how we're going to navigate these challenges together because the trends that I talked about really put a significant strain on healthcare overall, not only in Western New York, but across the state.
Was there a moment, I guess, during negotiations, like maybe Friday, where it started to see like you might have a deal this weekend?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there was. So naturally, as part of the process, you're continuing to evaluate and understand what each other's points of view and perspective are and what you think the priorities are. That's a process we go through. That's a process they go through. And you continually are sitting down and evaluating those priorities together and then finding what you believe will result in an agreement. And that began to come into shape on Friday.
I know you kind of previously said like Kaleida's offer was like $200 million over 3 years. I don't know how deep you can get into it, but did you have to bring that up a little bit over?
So I don't want to go into specifics right now, John. I'm sure you can understand that. But yes, we did have an increase over what our last proposal was. Great. Thank you all very much. Take care.